something has come to me while I've been here, and it's come to me as not just an idea, but a full realization. And the phrase that came to me was how to involve the whole self without being self-involved, and trying to get to that sense of discernment and commitment. So yeah, I talk a lot about participation, and I don't just mean it in the everyday sense. I mean it in this profound platonic sense of participation, and participation horizontally between people, and participation vertically between levels of the self and levels of reality. And that hasn't been a waste of time by any means, but when I came here, because of being touched by the collective wisdom of the group, this question of how does participation really show up? How does it show up in consciousness, cognition, emotion, energetically, experientially, existentially? How does it show up? And what are the opposites? What are the forces on it that pull it from not showing up? And one is when that collective intelligence appears, right? The logos, Geist, the 1,000 words, and none of them right and none of them wrong, right? When that shows up, like, the one thing we can do is we can first person mine, and then that loses the participation. We consume it. And then there's the third person. It's over there. And yet, we don't want to not try to articulate it. We don't want to not try and commit. And so Socrates was often trying to get people to find that place between those two things that are so easy to default to, and that our culture so incentivizes us. It so incentivizes us. I mean, these are the two poles of reality that Descartes gave us. It's like, well, what's real? What's real is the third person, mathematical, measurable, objective. No, the Romantics. What's real is the first person, I expressing myself, subjective. I'd come to realize before I came here, especially by doing the After Socrates project, that Socrates was trying to get people to find something beyond those, and that had already called me, because I've been deeply influenced by the idea that there's the modern idea that all of our problems have to be thought about in terms of this fundamental grammar of subjective and objective, and know that we're being called to something deeper that is actually the real relation between them. The second person you, where the second person you lives. And that's the horizontal, but at the same time, participation. The ancient world had an analogous one, which is the one and the many. How is being one and how is it many? And that's the vertical. And we want to again get between those. How the many is one and how the one is in many. The vertical and the horizontal, and And then so Socrates is doing this, but he's also calling people up, like in the symposium. There's the ascent of the vertical, but there's the love, the horizontal, like of other people's bodies, and then institutions and virtues, and all of that was powerful, and it's real, and it's deep and profound. And then it came to like this point, because the thing that Socrates, of course, does is he often doesn't define any of this or create a theory. He disassembles all of those so that a space for exemplifying it comes out. And so I was with people who were powerfully, or continue to powerfully, call. And so I got this coalescence to, that's all good. All that horizontal, vertical is good. And yet you're right, the nexus point between them is somehow like the point of reality and realization. But how do you do it? How do you involve the self, all of the verticality, from the soul of my embodiment to the spirit of my transcendence? How do I involve all of that without it becoming self-involved or self-neglectful? And of course, this is also part of the middle path of Buddhism. Like, so in the palace, and he's self-involved, and then he's in the forest as the ascetic, and he's self-negating, and he's trying to turn himself into a pure object. Neither one of those work. And we're in this group, and we're one, and we're many, and we're many, and we're one, and there's all of this is, what Spinoza says, the scientia intuitiva. You see the whole in each part, and the part in each whole. And it's not the subjective or the objective, it's the transjective, the anagogic. So the question to me is now, I'm realizing it's coming to grow in me as like a quest, is asking this question, questing beyond, and how do I fully involve spirit, sight, self, soul, in and the out, the center, the circumference, the center who's everywhere and circumference is nowhere. How do I fully involve that without becoming either positively self-involved, or how can I bring this and inflate, or negatively self-involved? The point I have to do is worship this and negate myself for it. And I've come to realize that that ability to find that standpoint with respect to the sacred is the place that I need to get a better sense of orienting towards and being able to navigate towards in order to help people, right? In order to really help people orient, to navigate, so that they find, because that point is the pivot point, right? That's the point where the nihilism can shift. You can't mandate or manufacture falling in love with someone. It doesn't happen. If you just give it all over to them, which many people try to do today, they try to make the lover take the role of God and history and culture and religion and save me. that's not, you won't get love. You can make love consumatory, self-centered, and these are just two different sides of the same thing. Like, because you even hear that you're saying it, you're worshiping the person, but you're also, what matters is me being saved. The sacred is here in order to save me. And there's something about, if I can come to that standpoint, where the whole of my being has been involved in a receptivity to something beyond, so that I'm called to something without being called to negate myself, but to participate, then I can love. It sounds trite, because of course, like I can hear people who are Platonic scholars going, of course, John, Plato realizes the deep connections between ontological participation and eros and love, and this is one of the profound insights. And then I could say back in the same kind of course he said it, and of course I know that, and right, and Ivan Illich always knew he was going to die, and 2 + 2 = 4, and then you get, oh, and what I'm trying to get is how do I show up for that, and how does it show up in all of these centers, and how they're aligned, and then how the world is calling me, and how I'm called into the world, and how am I called into other people. And I mean, I don't know. Well, again, it's that standpoint. I know and I don't know, which is of course another feature of love, right? If it was just self-power, it's not love. It's just other power, it's not love. If it was just knowing, then it'd be knowledge, and if it was just not knowing, it'd be ignorance. But it's this, and so it's love, and again, that sounds like a Hallmark card, and I'm tired and angry about the fact that we've emptied the words. And so sometimes I will use a word that is old, or an etymological source like dialogos rather than dialogue, because the current word has been emptied, and then people get angry. Why don't you just say dialogue? And it's like, well, because I'm deeply influenced by how we have emptied words, and therefore our ability to think and to feel and to be moved. When the words are emptied, we get emptied in our ability to represence, not represent, but represence how they can get a part of the world, part of ourselves called into this. You've asked people to enter into falling in love with being again, both their being, other beings, and the ground of being, all of them. And you've talked a lot about participation and different kinds of knowing and all of that, but there's this pivot point and it has a life to it, and that life is, it's being held in these words, and trying to properly conceive that in both senses of the word. And I have the intuition, another word that's been emptied, turned into either a magic word of subjectivity or an empty word to be dismissed as woo. See, it's always there. It's always these two poles that empty the thing. And then they scream at each other. That's part of the emptying. But I have an intuition that point, that pivot point is the point, and this is something else that has been coming, I've been wrestling with, and it's not just these two are coming together. This pivot point, Plato's problem of what ultimately turns someone to wisdom. And again, wisdom is one of the words that's either magic, 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 so or empty, empty, woo. And stop hearing both of those and try and get back to the you of wisdom. What turns people to wisdom? Turning is a good word. The Greek word metanoia means beyond, and noia is what I call perspectival knowing. It's knowing by noticing with a probative, insightful kind of noticing that realizes and situates you within more profound gestalts. And what is it that brings about that metanoia? You know, and Plato is perplexed by this because, of course, he has the figure of Socrates. And then you have Alcibiades, astonishingly beautiful, tremendously intelligent, charismatic, gifted, wealthy, influential. And he clearly is deeply, profoundly attracted to Socrates, but he turns. He doesn't turn to Socrates. He turns to that self-involvement. I'm reading an excellent book right now, historical fiction, Last of the Wine, and it's set in the Peloponnesian War, and it's set in Athens, and following these two friends, and the figure of Socrates shows up, and of course Alcibiades is there, but you know, Plato does this, what he always does. He dramatizes like something that it's not even right to call it a dilemma. It's kind of like if you could take a dilemma and a koan and a paradox and all have them all mutually impregnate each other, and I don't have a word for it. I just call it like this pivot point problem, hoping that the momentum of the alliteration gives it a trajectory, right? And it's like, what does the metanoia for people? And of course the trite answer, and Plato of course isn't trite, oh, it's love, and love of what's beautiful. But what's coming up for me is that these two things that were coming out for me as pay attention to me, right? Filled with presence and aporia, right? This, how do I involve and evolve my whole self without becoming self-involved in either self-infatuated or the self-negating fashion, which is something about really re-understanding, re-presencing love, and that what is it? I notice how I use the language when I was talking about that, about helping people to orient so that they can navigate. What turns people? What helps bring them to an orientation point so they have a standpoint so that they now turn to navigate in a certain direction? How do people turn so they metanoia? They go from seeing it as the emptiness to orienting to it as the horizon of the open sea that's calling them to find new ways of navigating unexplored territory. And that that's where I'm sitting right now. I'm sitting right on those two, and they're so, and I can feel how they're interpenetrating each other and shaping each other and calling to each other. And of course, I, I'm exemplifying the very thing I'm talking about. It's like that's in me, but it's not me. It's something I'm doing, self power, jiriki, but it's also tariki, tanabe. It's also other power. It seems to be here, but it grabs so much. So there's a bigger gestalt that's here, the one and the many, uh, and it's between me and other people, and also like Pascal, the spirit of finesse, like how, oh, I'm glad that came out. Like, how do I find I like that, the spirit of finesse, so that it's almost like I'm turning into a poem, so I can finesse the caress that is needed to address this. And I like that. I like the way that, I like it when when the muse, the poetry starts to come in to the philosophy. The poesis comes into the philia sophia, the philosophia, the love of wisdom. And see, as I'm doing this, and what I mean by exemplification, I don't mean just an example. I mean there is a presence, a spirit that's alive in me. It's electrically running through my thoughts and my body, but it's not just a sensation or experience. It's a living intelligibility that's opening things up to me, and it has this almost movement. Like these movements are almost synesthetic gestures for me that are imaginally trying to not only convey it but invoke it. How do I love this thou? It's neither this nor thou. How do I love it? How do I care in that love so that I'm not deceiving myself, that this isn't some grand, complicated, narcissistic spiritual masturbation or some grand narcissistic attempt to finally confess, right, to the God of my childhood that um, I had left behind. And as soon as you do that, as soon as you take that existential stance and love it and live it and logos it and leap it, um, and Augustine felt this. You feel the counterweight. It's like tasting the honey of that sunshine. You start to feel all the dark crevices, all the ways in which I fucked up, in which I failed, in which I'm faulted, and I did even vicious. And they come out and they well, that light that you're loving, that light has lighted us. There's a dark conspiracy between part of the voice is saying, look at what a shit you are. You can't do it. And the other voice is saying, go with your desires. Go with your anger. Take out how that person hurts you and nourish it. Nourish it. Don't forgive. You see, and then that leads me to this other thing that I've been really practicing. And as I'm speaking here, the Logos is bringing all of these together, which is there's something about those pivot points in this other. I'm reading Hegel's random spirit of trust, and right, and you have this really like this really rational. The real is the rational. The rational is the real. Hegel, but forgiveness and trust are so central. And I've been trying to bring in forgiveness into my practices because, and I couldn't have done it before now because of my very fraught relationship with Christianity. But this, again, words that I heard 1,000 times, but the words came alive for me again. And again, it's at this place, neither the I nor the it, but the you, right? Hear that in these words of Jesus of Nazareth. You're forgiven when you forgive. If you need, not wish, if you need forgiveness, and who doesn't, you will find it in forgiving. What would it be to practice that? To really try to soften my hard heart, open my closed heart, and really realize, again, this way I've been talking about it, really whole person realize the way I need forgiveness. Such that I'm empowered to forgive people I have been unable to forgive. And for me, that seems to also be right, again, on this involving the whole self but not self-involved, self-power and other power, this unique but also so much more. I mean, all of this is about loving wisely, and and forgiveness could become either one of those. It could become, heal me, I'm so hurt. And is there anything that makes us so selfish as pain, or our own hurt, our own hunger? Or forgiveness could be self-negate, lacerate myself. But again, like something other than that is what I'm feeling called. It's calling to me and what I'm being called into. And so, like participation, love, realization, forgiveness, they're all doing this. And again, they're not just doing it as some constellation of ideas. Parts of me are being activated, dangerously so. There's risk in the activation, and there's the risk of hubris, and there's the risk of not humbling but humiliation, and there's risk of a gravitas being sucked into a pre-rational, or there's the risk of just turning this into the rational in the pejorative sense of logical, the mere manipulation of complexity. But there's like the transrational where this more encompassing, where all of that is active, so that, and maybe this is it, all of those pivot points, all of the metanoia, the turning, the participate, all of those, this is, it's this is what it takes to really address self-deception. Because if you don't involve the whole of the self, the self-deception, the parasitic processing, we'll just move to another place. Take up life and residence somewhere else. It will inhabit other habits. It's really sinking in for me right now, this, what turns us? How do we participate? How do we love? How do we forgive? This is all about, what is needed to truly apprehend, appreciate, and address self-deception. If I think I'm going to overcome self-deception, I will do this. You failed. Yes. I'm going to get somebody else to do it. No, because you have to be able to indwell them and then internalize them and take them into yourself. It's a you, right? It's I and you, and I indwell you and internalize you, and that's the love, and that's the participation, and that's the self-deception. That's the hardest thing of all, maybe, right? I mean, I talk a lot about it. You know, when you always face the risk of the doctor who thinks that if he studies the disease, he will be immune from it just by the act of studying it, which of course is an instance of the very thing I'm talking about, right? I talk a lot about self-deception, and I don't just talk. I study it scientifically. I reflect on it theoretically, philosophically. I try to enact it, come up with practices. But all of this is in some way returning to me to really, I don't know, I don't have the adjective. I want to say something like to realize, reinventio the power of self-deception. And what it would really take to turn. And see, now this is becoming, I'm going to the pivot point because I really want to turn. And is this all just, again, a very complex way in which John Vervaeke has just made this all about himself? You see, again, I keep coming to the very thing. I really want to turn, and I want to say that in a way in which it's not about me, because I want the turning to connect to something that is beyond me, that has a reality, a depth beyond me. I want to really turn, but I don't. But I'm not, and I also just don't want to treat myself as a specimen that I'm examining so that I can write up some scientific paper. Like I want to come. I want my muse and everything I've learned and my faults and my virtues to all come together so that I can, as honestly as is humanly possible, virtuously mean it, meaning in all the meanings, mean it when I say, I want to turn, and I want to turn in a way that helps other people to turn. I'm done.